avoid these 3 common lubrication mistakes. Mistake number 1, scheduling lubrication tasks on a calendar basis instead of a conditional basis. Greasing a bearing once per week or once a month may seem like a sensible thing to do. After all, performing scheduled maintenance at regular periods is an age-old concept ingrained early on. Even OEMs still advise best practices based on time intervals to ensure maximum asset lifespan. Are they right? Or does their advice steer us in the wrong direction? Bearings need grease for one reason only, to reduce friction. As long as the lubricant is performing that service well, there should be no need to change it or add more. Yet we frequently do, with potentially catastrophic results. Relubricating a bearing just because your calendar told you time's up is the first mistake you must avoid. Don't let your calendar overrule common sense. Instead, monitor, measure, and trend friction levels and predict precisely the right time to grease. The second mistake is adding the wrong amount of grease. Sometimes we add too much, other times not enough. Both are wrong. Too much grease builds pressure, pushing the rolling elements through the fluid film and against the outer race. The bearing has to work much harder to push the rolling elements through a mud bog of grease. Imagine for a second you're running along a beach, ankle deep in water. Your legs effortlessly drive your feet with each step while a small amount of water splashes coolly around your ankles. You feel as though you could run forever and never get tired. Now imagine running knee-deep or even waist-deep in water. Your legs tire quickly. The water surrounds you and makes movement feel awkward and unnatural. You might grunt, you might groan and strain until, after a few seconds, you give up from exhaustion. A bearing drowning in grease will run hot. Excessive heat breaks down the grease. The whole system is an inefficient waste of energy. How do we avoid this mistake and stop at just the right amount of grease? By monitoring the bearing's friction level with ultrasound as new grease is being applied. As new grease flows into the bearing cavity, a measurable change in ultrasound levels is measured, heard, and recorded with an SDT LubeTech kit. As the decibel level approaches normal baselines and stabilizes, you know only the needed amount of grease has been added. Like any job, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. Simply listening to a bearing with an ultrasound device that gives no quantitative feedback is a recipe for disaster. The audible feedback is too subjective to draw any comparative conclusions. No two people hear the same, and there's no way to remember what the bearing sounded like a month ago. So what's mistake number 3? Sacrificing quality for price. Always use an ultrasound instrument that provides a digital decibel measurement. Do not rely on stethoscopes, screwdrivers, and listen-only ultrasound instruments.